Mm-hmm.
A full-page ad for an individual restaurant?
Mm-hmm.
Whoever took that out must be nuts.
Why do you say that?
Do you know how much a full-page ad costs?
No, how much?
It costs...
Dick York disappeared from Bewitched in 1969, and the studio told America it was exhaustion. But his family kept a secret for decades. In 2003, hidden footage finally surfaced showing what really happened on set. A collapse, a scream that lasted 20 minutes, and a deal that banned York from ever speaking the truth. By the time he died in 1992, he'd gone from Hollywood star to cleaning toilets for survival. His wife had discovered over 200 pills hidden throughout their home. Today, his son is finally revealing what the cameras never showed. He was born on September 4th, 1928, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, at a time when the country was still licking its wounds from the Great Depression. His father, Bernard, tried to hold things together with whatever work he could get as a salesman, while his mother, Betty, stitched clothes and eventually opened a small beauty shop just to keep the lights on. But inside all this hardship, there was something strange happening, something no one expected. A Catholic nun at Dick's parochial school noticed something different about the boy. Not in the way he behaved, but in the way he spoke. His voice had a rhythm, a richness, a sharpness that didn't belong in that run-down Midwestern neighborhood. She pulled him aside and gave him something that would change everything. Her belief. She encouraged him to speak, to perform, to treat his voice like an instrument. That spark lit a fire. When the family moved to Chicago around the time Dick was 10, they weren't chasing dreams. They were chasing survival. But Chicago turned out to be the best possible accident. The city was alive with voices. Radios hummed in every kitchen. And Dick? He sat next to them, soaking in every word like it was gospel. He didn't just listen to shows like Fibber McGee and Molly. He absorbed them, mimicked them, lived inside their rhythm until the voices became part of his own. And by the time he was 15, he wasn't just another kid with a hobby. He was the lead voice on a national CBS radio show. That Brewster boy. One day, he's copying radio stars from a cramped apartment. The next, he's the one other kids are trying to copy. He wasn't the first Joey Brewster. 2 others had played the role before him, but something clicked when Dick stepped up to the microphone. His timing, his tone, the way he turned ordinary words into moments. It wasn't training. It was something deeper. The show ran for years, backed by Quaker Oats, and broadcast into millions of homes. Dick York, teenage boy from a broke family in Chicago, was suddenly a household name before he even finished high school. But just because he was making money didn't mean the money lasted. The Yorks had scraped by for too long to feel stable. Bernard's sales work was still shaky. There were still days when food was thin and rent was uncertain. Dick worked whatever gigs he could, never really relaxing, because he'd seen what happens when the money stops. He never forgot. Years later, when he owned property, he didn't kick people out for missing rent. He let them stay, and he kept letting them stay, even when it drained him. He just couldn't forget what it felt like to be close to losing everything. His early years weren't just shaped by money or radio scripts. There was a moment when everything almost stopped. A health scare. Some sources point to polio during his teens. Others are more vague, but what's clear is that Dick York didn't come out of those years unscathed. He was fragile in ways he didn't show. The real blow came later, in 1959, on a movie set. Pushing a handcar alongside Gary Cooper in They Came to Cordura, something inside him tore. The muscles along the right side of my back, they just snapped, he'd later say. That was the beginning of chronic pain, of painkillers, of a downward slope he'd never quite recover from. But the seeds of that fragility were there long before. There's some confusion about when his radio career really started. Some say 15, but others, including a few buried interviews, say it was 1941, when he was just 13. Either way, he was too young to be carrying the weight of a national show, and yet he did. He carried it for years. And it wasn't just about fame. That paycheck lifted his family out of despair. At a time when some nights meant skipping dinner, York's radio checks put food on the table. Then it all collapsed. Not because of ratings, not because of talent, but because of politics. In 1945, the show's writers, Pauline Hopkins and Owen Vincent, were accused of sympathizing with communists. It was the early Cold War, and paranoia was currency. They'd been sending aid to communist forces fighting Nazis, and that was enough. The ad agency told Dick to distance himself. He was 17. He could have kept his job. But he didn't. "I didn't know what it was all about," he later said, "but I was with them." That loyalty cost him the role. The show was rebranded, recast, and moved on without him. But he didn't stop. He joined Jack Armstrong, All-American Boy, as Billy Fairfield and stuck with it for 6 years. Steady work, familiar scripts, comfort in repetition. He also jumped onto shows like Grand Marquis, Meet the Meeks, My True Story, and dozens more. Hundreds of episodes. Somewhere along the line, he developed nearly 400 character voices, from gruff old men to dreamy kids. It wasn't just acting anymore, it was vocal architecture. And on one of those sets, in between takes, he met a teenage commercial reader named Joan Alt. She was 17, he was 23. Her parents hated him, said he was broke, said he was a nobody, said they'd have him arrested. So they did what young people in love do. They ran, drove to Rockford, Illinois at 2 in the morning, paid $5 to a justice of the peace, married in secret. The gossip columns had a field day. Her father disowned her. Her mother cried for days. And Dick? He just held her hand through it all. Then came TV. His first role was on Lights Out, a horror anthology on NBC in 1950. The episode was titled The Man Who Couldn't Die. York delivered an 8-minute monologue about eternal life, filmed live with no breaks. His performance disturbed viewers so much that NBC got 47 complaints. One woman swore her husband couldn't sleep for a week. The network loved it. So did critics. By 1952, he landed a spot on Going My Way with Gene Kelly, earning $750 per episode. But it wasn't smooth. The network's Catholic advisors hated his humor. He clashed with them, nearly got fired for a joke about confession. Kelly saved him. Again. But York's refusal to follow stiff scripts made producers nervous. His scenes needed retakes. Directors complained. He was gaining a reputation, not for bad work, but for being hard to contain. That reputation got worse after a failed pilot called The Marriage in 1953. Executives said he looked too young to be a husband. Then they leaked his audition tape as a joke, passing it around studios as what not to do. York had no idea until he showed up at auditions and got told no before he read a line. It wrecked him. He went 6 months without work. The humiliation nearly ended his career. Then came the Jack Benny program in 1954. 20 million people watched him play a hitchhiker. He was funny. Really funny. Too funny. Benny exploded during rehearsal when York's ad-libs got more laughs than his own lines. "This is my show," Benny shouted. York was cut down to 3 minutes. That was the end of their working relationship and the start of another blacklist. At 27, Dick York wasn't supposed to outshine anyone. Not in a town already packed with charmers and crooners. But he did. 3 auditions later, he'd beat out 200 other hopefuls, including a rising Tony Curtis, to land a Universal Pictures role in Someone Stole My Gal. The studio gambled $850,000 on the picture. Dick got $15,000 and 3 musical numbers, 2 studio days to record them, and 1 very long kiss with June Haver. That 18-second kiss took 14 takes, and somewhere between those takes, they were snapped sharing lunch. The tabloids ran with it. Rumors flew. Box office jumped 23%. Even Fred MacMurray showed up on set twice, just watching. When the dust settled, the film grossed $2.1 million. Dick's fan mail skyrocketed from none to 400 letters a week, and Hollywood had a new heartthrob. But Hollywood doesn't stay soft for long. 1 year later, on Stage 7 at Republic Studios, the chase scene for The Naked Street turned into a near-death moment. A prop dynamite charge, meant to dazzle, exploded just 4 feet from York. Real black powder, wrong timing. Both eyebrows gone, cheek burned, metal in the face, 23 stitches deep. Co-star Farley Granger was knocked cold. The studio bled $75,000 in delays. York filed a $12,500 claim. But something more lasting entered his life that day. Painkillers, Demerol, codeine. It started small, for the burns, for the ache, for the things that wouldn't stop hurting. By 1958, York's talent had become a threat, especially to someone like Bing Crosby. When the Going My Way adaptation took shape, Crosby, still clinging to his image at 55, made sure York's light didn't shine too bright. Crosby got 27 script changes pushed through. Dick lost 15 minutes of screen time, 3 songs, and a powerful confession scene. "Too vulnerable," said Crosby. Made him look soft. Lighting changed. Close-ups redone to flatter one man and dull the other. But Variety still called York magnetic and natural. And that only made things worse behind the scenes. Then came Operation Mad Ball, 1957's riot in a can. York played Private Hogan, throwing a burlesque bash with real strippers from Minsky's, including Lily St. Cyr. 8 seconds of topless scandal. That was enough. Censors panicked. Columbia made 2 cuts, 1 clean, 1 dirty. Texas, Georgia, and Utah banned both. The studio lost $400,000, but the buzz worked in York's favor. Fan mail hit 600 a week. Harry Cohn called him box office gold. Rebellious, edgy, bankable, all because of one wild party and a few too many drinks for the MPs. But July 23, 1959, changed everything. They Came to Cordura was filming in Arizona, heat blazing at 118 degrees. York and Gary Cooper were lifting a 400-pound handcar. The scene was simple, just push it 15 feet. But on the 3rd take, when Cooper let go, York didn't. He kept lifting, alone. Something in his back gave way with a sound like a snapped branch. L4 and L5 vertebrae compressed. He collapsed, screamed. They gave him aspirin. It was 3 hours before someone realized he couldn't stand. 97 days in a Phoenix hospital. $18,000 in bills. Morphine, Demerol, then something experimental. That's when the dependency stopped being subtle. Despite the warnings, York signed onto the Flying Fontaines in 1960. A circus drama, aerial stunts. He did them all, injured spine and all, swallowing painkillers between takes. Audiences didn't see the trembling hands or the slanted board he used backstage to lie flat. They saw a trapeze artist. They saw commitment. They didn't see the beginning of the end. By 1961, Lover Come Back was meant to be light, rom-com fluff with Doris Day and Rock Hudson. But behind the smile, York was consuming up to 20 Vicodin a day. He nearly collapsed during a kiss scene with Day. The studio buried the incident. He'd already begun shrinking from his original 6'1", hunching, deteriorating. Every day ended with pills. Every scene carried more weight than the last. Then came The Wheeler Dealers in 1963. Another comedy, another bar fight, another injury. No stunt double, no cushion. York screamed, not the scripted kind, the real kind. The crew froze. A medic was called. His back was now beyond repair. Still, he pushed through. The charm remained. The bones didn't. State Fair should have been simple. Instead, scandal erupted. 1962. Rumors flew of an affair with 21-year-old Anne Margaret. Photos leaked. Hotel rooms. Hands held too long. MGM scrambled. York had been married to Joan Alt since 1951. The scandal nearly broke them. His painkillers blurred the lines between intention and impulse. Publicly, silence. Privately, chaos. It was the beginning of his image fracturing. Later that year, the hook turned dark. A Korean War film about executing a POW. York played the soldier who couldn't pull the trigger. The script demanded vulnerability. Too much, maybe. He sought therapy mid-filming just to keep going. It was his last leading film role. The movie tanked. His body tanked with it. But television wasn't done with him. Between 1957 and 1963, York appeared 7 times on Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Crime, suspicion, shadowy motives. He nailed them all. The 12-Hour Caper stood out. $500,000 in stolen bonds. York as a cunning embezzler. 7.8 stars on IMDb. No one realized he'd never met Hitchcock, not once, despite all those appearances. Suspense, it turned out, was his strength. So was hiding pain. The Twilight Zone added another eerie notch in 1960. The Purple Testament, a World War II captain watching men die, one by one. A light appears on their faces before death comes. York's performance hit hard. Then real tragedy struck. On the day it aired, his co-star and director were in a plane crash. One death. The broadcast still went on. The lines between fiction and reality blurred again. In 1961, York filmed an episode of Route 66. It mirrored his life too closely. A character living in pain, pushing through. By now, he kept a flatboard in his trailer to lie on between takes. He was working in agony, scripted or not. It was 1964, and Dick York was one of more than 200 actors hoping to land the role of Darren Stevens in Bewitched. The catch? He had to copy Elizabeth Montgomery's iconic nose twitch mid-dialogue. While most stumbled or overplayed it, York nailed the moment so perfectly that producer William Asher didn't hesitate. He got the role on the spot. But right then, York made a choice that would cost him everything. He told the truth. He admitted that he'd injured his back badly in 1959 on the set of They Came to Cordura, when he tried helping lift a railroad handcar that shifted and twisted his spine. Rather than replace him, the studio bent over backwards, literally. They built a hidden 15-degree leaning wall on set, designed so York could rest against it discreetly. They moved his dressing room to the ground floor. They even crafted a chair with custom spinal support. Everyone thought his honesty was noble. But that injury never healed, and it never stopped growing. By the second season in 1965, every morning started with 15 pills, not vitamins. These were heavy-duty, Percodan, Demerol, and muscle relaxants so new they hadn't even passed FDA approval. Every line he delivered on camera came through a haze of synthetic survival. Directors William Asher and Richard Michaels often spent hours cleaning up his slurred takes in the editing room. But no amount of post-production could hide what happened during the episode A is for Aardvark. In the middle of a scene, just as he said, "Samantha, what have you done?" York's legs gave out. He collapsed into a bookshelf with a thud, still holding his lines. The footage was so alarming that studio execs feared it would leak to Variety, which was already sniffing around for proof of York's condition. The official story? Exhaustion. The real footage? Locked in a vault until 2003, when a former crew member quietly sold it to entertainment historians. But while the producers covered the damage, someone else quietly covered him. Agnes Moorehead, Endora, with her steely glares and theatrical scorn on screen, was his unlikely ally. Behind the scenes, she became his supplier. She hid prescription bottles in her costume's fake sleeves and spell props. Sometimes she'd pass them off as part of a scene. York would take what looked like a magic ingredient from her hand, only it was a muscle relaxant. During one shoot in 1966, while filming Nobody's Perfect, his character was turned into a dog. That day, he swallowed 23 pills. His barking delivery became so confused that no one knew if he was acting or slipping. Moorehead later told her biographer that she did it out of guilt. Her own son had died in the war. Helping York became a way to mother someone again. She documented every pill, every mood swing, every fall, scribbled in a hidden diary that only surfaced years later. In 1967, everything finally snapped. During Samantha's Good News, the script called for a gag, a pratfall onto a hardwood floor after slipping on a banana peel. York hesitated. His spine couldn't take it. The on-set medic warned Asher not to push. But Asher, feeling the pressure of production delays, made the threat real. Dick Sargent was waiting. One wrong move, and York would be replaced. So York did the stunt. The disc slipped. His sciatic nerves screamed. He didn't stop yelling for 20 straight minutes. They carried him off set like a broken doll. For the next stretch of episodes, Darren was always on a business trip. Samantha had to invent new magical excuses for his absence, each one more ridiculous than the last. The fans started to notice. Why didn't she just zap him back? Then came 1968, the episode Samantha's French Pastry, and the final straw. York had pneumonia. His temperature hit 104 degrees. But the scene needed him to climb 8 feet of scaffolding holding pies for a slapstick climax. Rumors were swirling that Sargent was being groomed to take over, and York didn't want to hand the role away by skipping a shoot. So up he went. Halfway through, he blacked out. Fell face first into a mountain of fake pies. Unconscious. They rushed him to Cedars-Sinai. 6 days in the hospital. When William Asher visited, he found a man barely breathing, wrapped in wires, tears cutting down his cheeks. York looked up and whispered, "Bill, I can't fake it anymore. The magic is gone." And just like that, it was over. No farewell party. No grand exit. A confidential agreement barred him from discussing his addiction publicly for a decade. They reshot the pie scene with a double. The final episode he appeared in aired quietly on March 25, 1968. He left Bewitched in March 1969, hoping the worst was behind him. Chicago welcomed him with open arms, and Inherit the Wind was supposed to mark Dick York's triumphant return. He stepped onto that stage carrying a decade's worth of pain, both physical and emotional. But that pain didn't just linger. It devoured him. As he delivered the most powerful lines of the courtroom speech, his spine collapsed. Literally. The audience thought it was part of the act until York began crawling across the floor, the curtain dropping in confusion. That single moment wiped out the rest of the show's 20-night run and left him with $50,000 in damages he couldn't pay. That wasn't just the end of a play, it was the end of his entire stage career. By the next year, Demerol had become his constant companion. 40 pills a day, just to breathe through the agony. Spring of 1970, he quietly checked into a rehab center under the lie of a Palm Springs vacation. But addiction doesn't care about plans. It pulled him back in fast. In 1971, CBS offered him a guest role in the pilot of MASH, A Fresh Start. But he arrived slurring, glassy-eyed, and gone. He was fired after 2 hours. Word spread. His agent dropped him after finding out he'd been writing bad checks to buy pills from different doctors. He didn't just lose the job, he lost Hollywood. That same year, irony came knocking with a paycheck. Anacin hired him to do a painkiller commercial, just a simple voiceover gig. $30,500 for a few hours of work. But in the studio, he sounded distant, off, like he was underwater. When the final take glitched and revealed him mispronouncing relief as reef, they canceled the deal, demanded a refund, and left him $5,000 in debt. Behind closed doors, the whispers began. York had become a ghost in the industry. Then came 1972. His wife, Joan, wasn't just holding their family together, she was now on the verge of walking out. She discovered over 200 Demerol pills buried in a coffee can out back. Others were sewn into stage costumes, hidden in books, stuffed in vacuum cleaner bags. The betrayal wasn't just addiction, it was secrecy. She left with the kids, and York moved into a 40-a-week motel in Van Nuys. While foreclosure notices piled up at home, he took a job delivering mail for $96 a week. Joan returned only after he began therapy with a Beverly Hills addiction specialist they couldn't even afford. But she came back anyway. By 1975, smoking had done what even the pills hadn't. His lungs were wrecked. At 46, he was told he had 6 months to live unless he gave up acting, gave up smoking, gave up everything. They sold their $200,000 Hollywood Hills home for half its value, $100,000, just to pay the $78,000 in medical bills. Oxygen tanks had scorched carpets and walls. Buyers were told up front about his condition. They used what little they had left to buy a modest apartment building in West Covina. York hoped rental income might be their safety net. But when tenants fell behind, he refused to evict them. He couldn't. And so the building slipped through their fingers too. They lost it all. By 1976, Dick York and his family were on welfare. Fast forward to 1986. Michigan, the final stop. They lived in his late mother-in-law's tiny red bungalow near Grand Rapids. The man who once earned 6 figures was now cleaning toilets to survive. His $650 a month pension from the Screen Actors Guild barely covered food. In interviews, he didn't sugarcoat it. "I went from star to scrubber overnight." His teeth were gone, his weight ballooned, then dropped. What was left didn't resemble the charming Darren Stevens from the golden days of Bewitched. But in 1988, something inside him reawakened. From a worn-out recliner in the corner of his living room, tethered to oxygen tanks, he launched a charity. Acting for Life. He didn't have money, but he had time. He called radio stations, warehouse managers, government offices. That year alone, he helped clothe 15,000 people using military surplus, shipped mattresses and sleeping bags, even secured orange juice concentrate and pantyhose for shelters. While his own family owed $20,000 in back taxes and sometimes skipped meals, he was feeding 1,000 strangers a week. 1990 offered a cruel tease. A Bewitched reunion was in the works, a chance to return to the role that once made him famous. But insurance companies wouldn't touch him. He was too sick, too risky. He wasn't even allowed to join the set. Later, a different show offered $10,000 for a cameo. He turned it down. His health had robbed him of his comeback. Again. By 1991, the cracks had reached his children. Mandy, his youngest daughter, fell into a deep depression, watching her father's condition worsen. When bills piled up again, the family did the unthinkable. They sold his old Emmy-nominated radio tapes from his early days, his legacy, for $2,000. It wasn't just memorabilia, it was memory, pride, identity, but they needed the money. That year, they survived solely on his $650 pension. Nothing else came in. In 1992, York was offered experimental treatments for his emphysema. Expensive, uncertain, and desperate. He refused. Quietly. In a letter to Joan, he wrote, "I've taken enough from the world." He wanted the little money they had left to go toward the children's education. On February 20th, 1992, he died at Blodgett Memorial Hospital. He was 63. He left behind 5 children, a wife, and a string of unpaid debts. His funeral, held 2 days later, was quiet. Too quiet. Despite being one of TV's most familiar faces, few showed up. It was a small service at Peterson Funeral Home in Rockford. Reverend Gary Davis presided. He was buried in Plainfield Township Cemetery. No grand monument, just the weight of what had been lost. The world kept spinning. Bewitched reruns played on TVs across the country, generating millions. But York's family saw none of it. Not a cent. His memoir, The Seesaw Girl and Me, released posthumously, revealed how he'd been cut out of the fortune. Meanwhile, his kindness, his refusal to evict tenants, his decision to skip treatment, had cost his family their home, their security, and their savings. His son, Chris, now guards what's left of his legacy. In the 60th anniversary Blu-ray release of Bewitched, Chris shared intimate stories of a man who tried to smile through unbearable pain, who gave even when he had nothing left. The documentaries he helped produce reframed York not as a fallen star, but as a man who gave everything to everyone else first. The show's anniversary brought a new wave of fans discovering Bewitched for the first time. The numbers were impressive. It ranked number 564 among all streaming shows, with over 1,200 active members discussing it on Reddit alone. And yet, visitors to York's final resting place in Michigan often find it quiet.